the gist of it. Professionally in the office, there's 5 of us total. 3 of us are working here with a kind of a full-time commitment. We see 3, as young as 3, all the way through adulthood, everything from, the first call of, I think my person might have a drug problem, some intervention work, some treatment placement. We will work with the whole family, the little babies, the adults. We have someone here that likes to work specifically with the individual in recovery. So we like to be able to treat the entire family. And that was a goal that I had, was to be able to not only have the person seeking treatment, but also be able to care for the entire family through the process, because honestly, that's what saved our family. So I'm curious, are you guys working in treatment center settings? Are you working in private practices? What's the kind of general background here?
I'm actually a school counselor in Lafayette Parish,
Okay.
elementary school. This actually caught my eye because I actually worked at a teenage drug rehab in Opelousas for about 2 years as a tech. But what I'm seeing a lot of now these days is I'm having a lot of kids come in, like I'm talking pre-K, and they've been born with copious amounts of drugs in their system, and they're 5 or 6 years old and it's still in their system.
Yeah. The effects through the family go sometimes farther than we even stop to think about. Is anyone in here in private practice? Treatment center settings? If you don't want to speak, you just be like, hey, that's me. Because I have it on the gallery view where I could see some faces for right now.
Yeah, we're an outpatient treatment center here.
Okay. What about business development? I know there's a few of you guys, business development. Yeah, Katie, Taylor, Michelle, and I think Brandon, if I remember right, it's also business development. Hi there.
And you have a couple people off camera over here that I know are in private practice.
Oh, okay. So I can't see everyone on the screen. I'm going to go ahead and switch it back over to the slide so I can kind of see, where I'm talking with you guys too. Maybe Taylor can put them up, and if we can put it on this slide that I think slide number 3, it says, who are the helpers? Yeah. And this presentation is about working with professionals in this field, whether you are actively working in the addiction field or you've decided that your professional work is not directly working with addiction. I think it's fair to say that at this point, we're all aware of the opiate crisis. We're all talking about the opiate crisis. And so you can't be in the mental health world without having an awareness of what's going on with the opiate crisis. And so that's kind of the gist of this, whether you're in the directly working with addiction or you choose not to. I'm hoping that this can be something that's valuable for everybody, because we're all affected. And so on that slide that says, who are the helpers? I think it's the next one. And I just want to acknowledge that we're not all just, counselors in business development. We have everything from the medical side of it all the way through even pastoral care. If you look at that, did I miss anybody? Anybody you think I should have on that list that's not there?
Is EAP on there? I know we have Laura White on here today that is an EAP.
Okay, so an EAP, tell me about what you do as an EAP.
I think she's on mute.
That's okay.
I think I don't know, can you hear me? I just took my microphone.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Laura.
Hey, so employee assistance programs are often the first link to treatment, and we can be the link for family as well as the person suffering from addiction. And we follow the person through the whole continuum of care, from assessment to admission to aftercare, and can be a really important bridge and support in having a global picture of somebody's recovery.
Yeah, I love that. You guys are really on that first line. You probably spotted in the consequences that are associated with work and maybe the management of that person's finances. So yeah, super valuable. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm
interventionist
Okay,
I'm
so you're in the front
an
lines of it
interventionist,
too.
so could probably be on here.
Okay, so EAP and interventionist.
It's
Did I
school
miss anybody
counselors.
else?
School counselors. Like, I know it's
School
not
counselors.
the same aspect, but we see it a lot.
You do. You see it in the little ones. If we go down to slide number 5, this is something that, one before it, it's, yeah, there we go. It says, you are either the person or you love the person who struggles with substance abuse. And I don't know that that's any kind of clinically validated kind of statement. There it is. You're either the person or you love the person who struggles with substance abuse. That's just an observation that I think I heard in a meeting, and I've kind of adopted it as something that's really meaningful for me. I feel like in every conversation that I have in my professional life and even in my personal life too, it seems to be in some way, you know, we're influenced by this. And so it's important to recognize that even if you're not regularly working directly with substance abuse, a lot of the clients that you're going to interact with have been affected by substance abuse. And so I think it's just really helpful that we remember that anxiety phone call that you get, or maybe that child that's not performing quite so well in school, you know, there may be something going on in that family that can be traced back to substance abuse. The next couple of slides that are in here are about that first learning objective. It talks about the definitions of addiction, and we were talking right before this, and I feel like a lot of you guys that are on here are already going to have a really good understanding of what addiction is. The part that I tend to highlight with folks when we're talking about this, though, is that relapse is included in the ASAM definition of addiction. And so that I think is important to remember, because sometimes family members think that I just sent my person to treatment, so we're done, or 35 days in treatment or 90 days, we're done, right? They're fixed. And that's not necessarily the case. And remembering that occasionally we have to remember that relapse is not part of everyone's journey, but it can be a part of a person's journey. And if it happens in their journey, it doesn't have to be the end of the world. We can most definitely still move forward and use that as a meaningful experience for the person in recovery, but also for the family members. They can look at their role in it and how they responded to that person's their relapse. If we go, yeah, there we go. That's the ASAM definition. And if you can go into the learning objectives part again, I want to make sure it should be about slide number 12 or so. Yeah, there we go. Do you guys have any questions, or do we need to spend any kind of time on understanding what these definitions of addiction, what that is? I don't want to make assumptions about what you guys know or what you don't know. And if we're good on that, I want to hop into this one, this family roles. This is the one Taylor has up right now. And so, has anybody not heard of the family roles of addiction? It's fairly common in treatment center settings. We talk about this one a lot, and I think the highlight of it is to really say, we've all been affected, right? So in the family unit, every person sort of plays a part in what's going on. It's not something that they do consciously. It just sort of evolves once addiction hits the family. And so in the slide that says, ultimately they become the part that they're playing. Codependency happens as the addiction progresses. One of the things I really like to share with the families is that nobody's doing this on purpose. You know, by the time that we're talking about addiction in a family, or by the time we get to a treatment center setting, it's really fair to say that your person is no longer doing this on purpose. And it's also fair to look at the families and realize they're not enabling on purpose. They're enabling because they're doing the absolute best they can with what they know and with what they understand. And the same is true for the person that's struggling with the addiction. I believe that they're doing the best they can with what's going on in their brain. It kind of takes the blaming part out of this when we take that perspective, instead of, well, you need to get your act together and why can't you do this? And that's not helpful. When I shift into, I believe that this person is genuinely doing the best they can. You can think of it as an operating system in a computer. The computer's only going to do what the operating system says. So if the addiction disease is what's functioning in that person's brain, then they're doing the best they can based on that information. The same is true with codependency. Is anyone brand new to the family roles? I'm opening up the chat to see if there's any kind of questions in there too. It looks like everybody's kind of posting where they're from. That's really cool. I'm going to leave the chat open, so if you have some questions, you can pop them in there, or you can unmute yourself, or maybe Katie can help us unmute people for you to pop in with some questions. Is anyone brand new to the family roles? No? Okay. So I just want to pop briefly through those just to kind of say what they are. The next one says, it identifies the addict, and that one's fairly obvious. The key part of this slide, though, is that recovery rests on this person. What it means is that, and you guys know this, the person who is going to treatment, the person who is struggling with the substances, ultimately, they're the one who's going to work their own recovery program. We as counselors and professionals in this field can be supportive and we can encourage, and that's the same role for the family. They can be supportive and they can be encouraged, but we can't drag anybody into treatment. We can't drag them through counseling. It's something that they're going to embrace when they're ready. With the addict, then the next one is the hero. The hero that typically tends to be oftentimes the dads in the family, but not always. They tend to show up as, I'm going to show the perfect kind of family. When we were going through this, my the way the hero showed up, of course, was with my dad, and he shares this a lot. He says, I remember feeling like, and in his first Al-Anon meeting, he said he thought they were going to show him where was the button that he had to push on his qualifier, my brother, to make this better. So where was the fix it button? And so that's kind of what he was hoping for. He wasn't ready to take a look at his role in this. He also describes kind of as the hero, having had the experience of thinking, well, tell me how big of a check I need to write. Not that he had tons of money, but it was an illustration of how far he was willing to go to fix the problem. The mascot and the scapegoat. So I have mascot, lost child, and scapegoat are the next couple of slides. Mascot and scapegoat tend to kind of show up similarly. The mascot tends to be the one that uses harmful humor. That harmful humor comes out as sarcasm. The opposite one being the scapegoat, they're the ones that might tend to create a diversion. So they might act out in another way. And all of this is as an attempt to take attention away from the addict, because it's too painful sometimes to look at that. I'm looking at a couple of questions in here. What's the difference in how you work with and encourage the family to support an adolescent dealing with an addiction versus an adult? That's a good one. So that in these family roles context, you can also kind of look at how this adolescent is showing up in the family roles. This is information that's easy to find on the internet. There's a lot of illustrations of this. But if you can kind of help them figure out where they identify in these family roles, there's conversations you can build to help them feel empowered. And I would always do that, get them into counseling or get them some help where they have that sort of safe place to be able to describe these things. This family roles business is not something that I would throw out there as dinner table conversation, for most families. I think that would go terribly. But using this as a tool to help them identify what they're going through, and that they're not alone in this might help them feel a little bit more empowered. The other one is the lost child, and I think it's the slide right before the mascot. The lost child is the one that shows up as I'm good, I'm okay. They're the ones that are kind of quiet, and they usually have, good grades, or they're performing well at work. And sometimes we forget, to check on that lost child one. And so as a clinician or a professional in this field, when you see that one in the family, the group, that might be the one that you want to try to intentionally draw out a little bit more, because oftentimes they have a lot of truth to tell about what the situation is in the family. And then the one that we, in these family talks, tend to put a lot of attention on is that caretaker role, and that's the enabler person. I've seen a lot of dads fall into the role as the caretaker or enabler, but we tend to categorize that as the mom. I don't think that's generally fair to say it's always the mom, but a lot of times we see it as the mom. What do you guys think about this? Do you have any kind of ideas or feedback about these family roles, or something that you know to be important that I missed? You can either unmute it or put it in the comments. Okay, so I'm going to hop on to codependency, because I like to spend a little more time on this too. It's one of my favorite topics. Oh, you've worked with a lot of caretakers. Yeah, we're all well-meaning caretakers. Go down to past learning, the next learning objectives, to codependency. It shows the balloons and the two hands sort of pulling on it. When someone first told me I was codependent, I was so offended and hurt my feelings, and I didn't want to have any more conversations about it, because it felt like someone was giving me a diagnosis, and codependency is not a diagnosis. They may have diagnosable anxiety, or they might have some diagnosable depression type symptoms that are going on, but codependency itself is not really a diagnosis, but it's a description of a relationship pattern. The definition that I threw up there, just kind of as an example, is straight off of Wikipedia. And the point I want to make with that is that while it might be fairly accurate, it's hard to remember. I don't memorize these kind of definitions. It doesn't work for me. So I came across it on the next slide. This is my favorite. It says, codependency is the agreement that I'm going to work harder on your problem than you are. My favorite definition of it, because I can remember that, right? So I can evaluate in a situation, am I working harder on this person's recovery than they are? The agreement I make with myself. Yeah. If I'm going to work harder on making my person be sober, want sobriety, stay in treatment, then I really need to take a step back and ask, am I working harder than they are? And if so, why? And is this appropriate? So the question is really just a call to investigate what's going on. I also like this because it doesn't limit itself to substance abuse situations. So I've got 2 adult children, and I've got one that's still in school. And with my younger one, there's been some school projects and homework and stuff, you guys are probably all familiar with. And I've found myself getting really frustrated at times. Did you do your homework? How's your AR grade going? And why am I working harder on you meeting your AR goal than you are? And so it prompts me to just take a look at my actions and see if I need to do something different. And yeah, in your work setting too, you can't be necessarily working harder than other people. there might be a time and a place for that, but really this is just a call to investigate, what am I doing here? Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Or has anybody heard it put that way before?
Mm-mm.
So yeah, I hadn't heard it like that either. I've come across lots of definitions, and they're fine and dandy, but hard to remember and hard to apply. Like that Wikipedia definition on the screen before. It's not necessarily wrong. It's just I don't think about that. So if I'm in a situation where whether it's substance abuse related or not, and I find myself getting frustrated about something that I just said yes to, then that's a call to investigate. Am I working harder on their goal or their health? And if I am, then is this okay? And what does that mean for me? So it's really just a call to take a closer look at my actions. I want to put it for a second back on the mode where I can see all your faces, because I've been seeing the screen for a little while and I kind of miss some of that human interaction from people, just to see where you guys are with this stuff. How we doing? What are your thoughts?
I think this is a really interesting way to put it, because I feel like codependency always comes with a negative connotation and complicated definition that nobody can ever understand. And this was a really good way to simplify it and make it easier for others to understand it.
Yeah, thanks. So I hope it's something that can stick in your head and you can use it with the people that you're working with, and just using it, in your daily life. I know that I have to think about a lot, whether it's work related or recovery related or kids related. If I'm saying yes when I really mean no, then that's something I need to take a look at. Why did I feel like I had to say yes? Am I doing something that's enabling? Because if I'm enabling, I'm probably going to be aggravated about that thing. Have you guys come across the idea of counterfeit love? That's in Melody Beattie's book, The Codependent No More. She talks about that around chapter 8 or 9 or so. You guys familiar with that one?
I am. I love Melanie
Okay.
Beattie. I have all of those books, as well as I read that Language of Letting Go every morning. So,
I love that one.
Yes.
So around probably about 2000, I don't know, 3 or 4, my mom gave me Counterfeit Love. And I thought, okay, I'll read it. And I was still a little irritable about the whole recovery process in the family, thinking that I wasn't affected. And I was getting there, but I was still thinking I wasn't affected. So I started reading the book, and I got to this part where she says it's counterfeit love. And I got so angry that I put the book down. And it took me a while to come back to that book. And, with some counseling and some other, time elapsed, what I came to realize was that reading that term counterfeit was something like being told you are loving your person wrong. That's kind of what counterfeit is. It's like wrong money or like bad money, it's fake. And that, I think that's what offended me so much. And I had to really take a look at that. It's not that we're loving wrong or bad. It's just that codependency cycle that shows up, that they're calling it counterfeit love. Or like, how dare you tell me that I'm loving my person wrong? That was offensive. But in taking a look at it, I have it in these slides, what she's talking about with counterfeit love. And it's in the book. If you're super familiar with it, maybe this will kind of be a bit of a review, but it's an interesting one to go over with families. You guys are welcome to have these slides if you want them. But breaking through that idea of maybe there's a better way to support my person and just genuinely love them. She tells the story of an alcoholic husband and the wife, and there's a long time alcoholism going on in this situation. And so they're at the point where she's asked him to quit. He won't quit. He won't really get help. It's a repeated pattern of things. And so in the rescue, the wife realizes, okay, well, I'm just going to go down to the bar and I'm going to pick him up about 11 o'clock or so. By then, he's probably had a couple of drinks. He's probably had enough, but since he can't stop and he can't seem to come home without any commotion, I'm going to go pick him up. And so for her, that sounds like a really good idea. And so that's what she does. She rescues him. She goes to the bar. She picks him up, brings him home. He's on the couch, sleeping. And then she kind of has this moment where she goes, oh, well, why do I have to keep doing this? And then she gets angry. And so I think, Taylor, if you're looking for the slide, it's about slide number, I want to say 25 or so. A few more up. Yeah, that one's good right there. You can see on that one. And so she gets angry because she's thinking, well, why can't he just stop at 1 or 2? You know, why won't he quit? Or if he loved me, he'd get it together. And so she's having all of those thoughts right after she did what she views as something really nice for her husband. She helped him. So some time passes, and it might be like the next morning or something, and he wakes up and we know that he's feeling, you know, a lot of shame, and he's probably got a hangover and all the consequences that are going with that. He doesn't feel good about himself, but then here she comes saying out loud all of those things that she was thinking. And I remember as being, you know, the codependent in this with my brother and doing a lot of rescuing, there were some times that I probably said some really not nice things because I was frustrated, because I was hurt, I was sad. And I didn't mean to hurt him, and I was trying to express what I was going through. But this is a part that I can really relate to, where I wish that there's a way that I could go back and sort of unsay those things or make some amends. But so she's angry and she says all of those things to him, and it hurts him. And so then he lashes back out at her and says stuff like, well, I didn't ask you to do this, or this is my problem, not yours. You know, no, I'm only hurting myself, not you. So he lashes back out at her. And then it goes around then to the victim side of it, where she doesn't understand, why is he not grateful? Why doesn't he appreciate what I did? I was only being nice. I was only trying to help. What's the matter here? And so she gets a little confused, and then withdraws again into herself, and he continues in his pattern with his addiction. And then on the next slide, it just shows how a little bit of time passes, and then we're off to the races again. The pattern persists. On this one that's up now, it shows these motives that are present with counterfeit love. But I just want to ask, you know, did that make sense with the triangle? Like the pattern. It's something that feels super familiar to me. Usually when I show families this, they sort of kind of sink into themselves. You know, they start to see the pattern, and they realize, oh my gosh, I'm doing something wrong. And it's important, you know, to remember there that we're all doing the best that we can with what we know. Melody Beattie goes on in those chapters to talk about these motives that go into counterfeit love. And so if you think about all the families that you've worked with, the extent of enabling, the depth, the manipulation, all the things that we see come up in some of these family conversations, and sometimes it's mind-boggling, but if you ask that family member, now that you know that it's enabling, or now that you know that it's not working, why were you doing what you were doing? And invariably, the answers are, because I love them. And that's it. It's some variation of, I love them. I don't want them to get hurt. I don't want them to go to jail. I don't want them to hurt somebody else. I want the pain to stop. And so it's all about genuinely helping their person. And so when that wife is in that rescue cycle that we showed in the triangles, if you ask her at the rescue, if you know that this is not a great idea, why are you doing it? All she can really tell you is because I love you. And then when we get into books like Melody Beattie's book here, or in counseling, or maybe in some Al-Anon work, they can start to see that there's more going on under the surface. I mean, this is where a lot of the hard work, I would say this is a lot of good therapy work when we get into these counterfeit love motives. I always suggest that people do this with either a therapist who understands addiction, or someone in maybe a 12-step program who has lots of experience in healthy sobriety, healthy recovery, and lots of experience in understanding the family component, because this can be a really sticky thing to work through. These four tend to show up. They can kind of bleed into each other and overlap. You might be with a person who identifies with all of them, or maybe only one or two. The first one is the ego. It looks something like, I can do life better than you, let me do it for you. In the story with the wife where she picks him up from the bar, she's decided that he doesn't do a good job of driving home safely, so she's going to go do it for him. It's sending a message that believes, it says, I don't believe you're capable, and so maybe there's another way for her to do it. Manipulation. I actually heard this statement once at a family visit. Some families were visiting their adults, and I heard the father say, I paid for treatment for you, you better get your life together. And it was so heartbreaking to hear him say that, because remember, at this point, this person is not doing this on purpose. Not at all. Maybe a better way to say that would be, I hope you do well, or we're rooting for you, we're cheering for you, or this was the only time we're able to pay for therapy or treatment. I hope you do really well. That might be appropriate, but not, you better get it together. The shame part shows up in statements like, if I do this for you, if I help you, if I bail you out of jail, if I help you fix this ticket, if I pay for treatment, will you forgive me, and will we be okay again? That's one of those ones that's really deep, and it hits at a lot of those layers of pain that sometimes our family members carry. And we unpack that again, in the right setting. But I think it's definitely there. I remember, when I was a senior in high school, my brother, who struggled with drugs, was a freshman in high school. And if you just think about that, being a senior, and I was the only girl, and I was the oldest, and Aaron was a freshman, that was the perfect opportunity for me to really be a jerk to my brother, right? And I was awful. I was sarcastic. And I wish that I hadn't been. And so in some of the depths of Aaron's addiction, I was really having some of the feelings of, yeah, but if I just keep helping you, would you consider me a better sister? Would you forgive me? Will we be okay? And I know that would not have fixed his addiction, but that was just an expression of my own shame and my own stuff that I needed to work through as my role in his life. Shame can also show up as, let me hurry up and bail you out of jail before mama or whoever knows that you're in jail. Sometimes it's about protecting that family image that they work so hard to create. And then the last one, my parents talk a lot about this from their own experiences. But the fear part, sometimes we enable, and the families enable so much because the fear is so big that they can't stand the thought of possibly losing their person. And if you've been in this field for any length of time, you know that that's a big risk that we take. Addiction can very, very often be lethal. How are you guys doing with these motives? I know I just said a lot of things kind of quickly, and I just want to check and see, how are you with this? Do you relate to any of it, or have you seen it in your work? What do you think?
I think I definitely needed this. You know, thank you. I think that you've put it in a perspective that's, I sometimes get overwhelmed with like family.
It looks like Taylor's talking, but I don't have any audio for Taylor. It
Oh.
doesn't look like she's muted, but I want to be able to hear what you said.
Oh, weird. Can everybody else hear me?
I can
Yeah.
Yes.
Hear me? I'll just chat.
So I don't know if it was my audio, but I'm not getting Taylor.
I'll just put it in the chat.
Can you hear me, Jessica?
Mm.
Can the rest of you hear me?
Now I can hear
I
Katie.
can
Yeah.
hear you.
Okay, great. So how does that information sit with you guys? And I know it's kind of a lot, and I want to make sure I didn't confuse or kind of lose anybody in that.
No, I think it's great information. I think it can be overwhelming. I think for
It
me,
is.
in working with some of the families, I think the hardest part is seeing the parents struggle to set the boundaries and seeing some of the family dynamics as things start to unfold. I work a lot with families, especially in the collegiate emerging adult program, working with some of these families and seeing some of these dynamics that you're talking about. It's just heart-wrenching. It's heart-wrenching.
It is. It is. And
see
it
a
can
lot
be
of,
exhausting.
I see a lot of it working with my families that have kids that are in jail, working with the attorneys trying not to allow the parents to go rescue them, which they want to do all the time, and helping them understand that if you go bond them out of jail and allow them to go home, they're going to take off. And so we really have to focus on who the weakest link is. And it's usually, in my experience, the mom. Unfortunately, it's just, and so that's who I'm doing a lot of work with, our moms. Kind of holding their hand through the whole process so that they don't go and allow their child to go home and then they take off. So we like to try to get them door to door, jail to treatment, which is going to be the most successful. But yes, absolutely, I see this all the time, and this was great. This has been a great presentation.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, for me,
Go ahead.
For me, it's the same thing. That the mother is probably the toughest thing I have to do as an interventionist, and because there's establishing boundaries that weren't there at all before, decision to cut the child off, fear of the mom being on the street on one hand, and not having the police come to their house, God forbid, to arrest the kid because what the neighbors might think. All these things you're juggling. I have one. I set up a meeting for a family recovery meeting here locally, and it's kind of an organic meeting with addicts in recovery and alcoholics and families of those either in active addiction, recovering, and so forth, and to hear the interaction, these families wanting to talk to these addicts and hear their thinking and everything else. But at one point last night, the woman was in there, brought in by her sister. She couldn't get her son to stop using in the house, and wouldn't kick him out. So she just left and got her own apartment and let the kid have the house and run roughshod over her. So it's never ending, and it's always a different angle, and you think you've heard it all, and something new pops up. But I'm getting a little bit out of this here, and if nothing else, refresher stuff. It's good. It's good to have. I appreciate.
Yeah,
it just helps me to go ahead,
Jessica. Yeah, you're presenting some great stuff, and I think we need to remember that the family is also a client, and to be mindful of their pain and giving them the tools to deal with their pain, you know, and it's been my experience. I haven't seen the right resource yet to help those families. So, I mean, I'm encouraged that you're offering this and offering this information, but the pain and the grief that families feel, I think we have to be careful, because we don't necessarily want to mislabel or judge, because there's that vulnerability of feeling at fault, particularly from a parent. And so you're walking a fine line of needing to provide support to them and not judgment for the decisions they've made, because they're already judging themselves.
Exactly. I find that so often my struggle, and it's even hard to recognize this as a family member now working in this field. Sometimes I'll get frustrated with the family members, and then have to stop and think, hey, Just, you know, that was you 15 years ago. You know, have a little bit of compassion for what these people are going through. And having what Melody Beattie put in that book with the counterfeit love and some of these other terms that are in here, they're not, you know, a diagnosis, and it's not a hard and fast rule that everybody is this or they are that. It helps me have a framework for looking at some of these families to remember to not only have compassion for that patient that's in front of me that might really need to go to treatment, but also for the families who can, you know, honestly sometimes be quite frustrating. And they're sometimes they're roadblocks in that individual getting healthy. And rather than getting frustrated, or when I find myself frustrated, I really need these frameworks to pull me out of my own frustration so that I can still love that family member that's in front of me, because they are hurting too. Their pain is not like the pain of the person that's going to treatment, but those family members are absolutely key in that successful recovery for that person. You know, that the next slide talks about enabling, and that's one of those squirrely terms. It says that enabling behavior prevents the addict from experiencing the full consequences of their behavior. It allows the individual to continue to be irresponsible. And so I think that you guys are all kind of already familiar with what that's like. But then the next one is about detachment. And oh, that word comes up all the time. We throw that one around like everybody's supposed to know what detachment means. And it sounds like I'm telling someone to be mean to their person, to detach, like you don't love them anymore. And that's not what we're saying. And I have to sometimes really slow down and remember that these family members don't understand the word detachment like you guys might, because you've been in this field for a while and you've got these experiences. And I have to really call back on those beginning days when someone told me to detach. And again, like I was mad and offended. It just means allowing the person, caring about a person enough to allow them to learn from their own mistakes. And giving them a context to really kind of look at that stuff helps, I think, the family members take a step out of that enabling. My dad said something once at a meeting that just struck me really hard, and I'll never forget it. He said that he learned that when he was enabling, when he was enabling my brother, he was taking away his dignity. And then he said, I never want to be the person who takes away somebody else's dignity. And I'll never forget that, because it was really profound. And if I'm enabling a person, then it's very possible that I'm taking away their dignity to create the success that they really want in their lives. You know, we have about 10 minutes or so left of this, and the piece about the families was really what I wanted to spend a lot of time talking about in this. This is kind of a long presentation that I've used for some for some like 3-hour CEUs, so I don't intend to cover all of these slides, but you're welcome to have all of these slides for your own use if you like. There's a list of, books and things that are in here towards the end of the slides. These are things that I use as resources for family members. The Melody Beatty books are in there. There's 12-step recovery resources that are in there. And the goal with that would just be to equip you with, what can I give a person who just walked into my office, who loves their person and wants them to get sober? I think it's like slide number 45 or so it starts with those different resources. If you do end up with a copy of these slides, as you scroll through them, you'll see some of them have hot links in them if you want to try to order these things on your own. All of that's available in there for you guys. But I just want to ask you, before we wrap it up, is there something about, working with families that you want to ask about or get more information? Anything that maybe left you feeling confused or uncertain about?
I have a possibly hard question.
Okay.
So like I had mentioned at the beginning, like I have a lot of pre-Kers and kinders who were born with lots of drugs in their system. And honestly, and I guess, do you think they could, like, what would be, trying to think of how to word it, I'm sorry. But I guess I'm just wondering, how could this like model of looking at things could possibly be helpful for them, because those are the students I tend to struggle with the most, because I don't know how to help the families as effectively.
So there's, of course, there's that medical piece in dealing with kids who are born with these drugs in the system. That we as maybe counselors, don't think anybody on this call is a medical doctor or any kind of, prescriber. And so that would be kind of the realm of the medical side, to just make sure that kid's needs are being met, that they have the resources. It might be occupational therapy, those things. So it could be that you're doing a lot of educating not only the child, but also the parents. And there may be some ways that you can gently talk about addiction. And it kind of takes that shame factor down when people realize that they're not the only ones that have been affected by this. It's, you either are that person or you love that person. And so for us to be able to talk about these things gives people an opportunity to say, yeah, my mom struggled, or my brother struggled, or my spouse is struggling. And it just, if we can begin those conversations. I don't work with children. Melissa in our office does. And so you're welcome to reach out to Melissa. She's a world of information. And any of you guys want to talk more with Melissa about working with children and adolescents, she will be happy to spend some time talking with you guys about that. You can message me and I'll get you her email, or I'll put it in the chat maybe if you want to reach out to her. She has some personal experiences with it, but a lot of her professional work is built around that. But I think if I know Melissa well enough and can speak for her, I think the biggest thing that she puts out there is looking at, what am I experiencing right now with that child? What is that child experiencing? Can I teach that child, or even this works with adults, can I encourage them to be the expert of their own experience? What are you feeling right now? Can you feel confident enough to say that I'm angry, that I'm sad, that I'm afraid, that I'm alone? Kids learn to do that, hopefully, and then as adults, sometimes, especially if we're affected by codependency or even our own recovery struggles, we can lose that intuitive connection of, what am I feeling right now? And anybody, I think, can benefit from learning to take that look on the inside of what's going on with me, and how can I use that as a guide to make the next right choice. So you as a school counselor, you may be able to use that present moment awareness with those kids really well, even if you don't have access into the family to work with, how they've been affected by addiction.
Yeah.
That's a good question. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer.
What else, you guys? Is there resources or ideas about this stuff that you've experienced that you want to share with us too?
I couldn't get myself off mute. One of the things I wanted to ask, we recently had, or I recently worked with a family that mom really struggled to let their child go in treatment, and continued to contact me and contact therapists. And one of the things that was suggested was getting mom into some treatment of her own for codependency. Mm-hmm. Where do you recommend for, and I know Ranch at Dovetree is great, but we know what's our realm. And we have a substance use primary, but where do you recommend for families and for residential for families that need that level of care? Because there are certain treatment centers in the country that treat codependency. Have you ever had that level where you need to send a family member?
Yeah, there's so OnSite has a fantastic program. Mani is, I'm drawing a blank on her last name right now, but Mani is super sweet, and she's a world of information about their programs. I know they're doing a lot of things online right now, so you can learn a lot. Or it's I kind of like some of this online stuff because it's sort of a safe way for a family member who's not too sure if that's really their struggle. They can sort of anonymously dip their toe in it and see if they relate to it. And so right now, sending them to places like OnSite online, they might be able to relate to that. There's another one that I'm drawing a blank on the name of it, but I think it's in Kentucky that we've used through Victory. I haven't used them personally, but I've heard some really good.
The Bridge to
Recovery.
Bridge to Recovery. Okay.
Bridge to Recovery. Mm-hmm.
Yep. I just wanted
some very good feedback.
Some of our guests here to know some of those places, because I think, it's always important to know some of those resources that are out there. Yep. Fran put her name in there, Monty Furlong at OnSite.
Yes, Furlong. Great.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and call around in your communities, and I think it's perfectly okay and appropriate. Maybe I irritate people sometimes if I do this kind of stuff, but I don't have a problem calling a nurse practitioner and asking them, hey, what is your perspective on addiction? And it's kind of weird maybe for a master's level counselor to call somebody that might, like have an MD or whatever, more letters behind their name. But I don't have a problem calling and asking, what is your perspective on this stuff? Or calling another counselor out there, kind of a peer-to-peer conversation to say, what is your perspective? Because when I'm looking for a resource for these family members, the last thing I want to do is send some of these somebody who's going to maybe put them all on antidepressants when maybe we need to start with more conversations and boundary settings, and I want to also be able to send to counselors in my area who are not going to look at my person that's struggling with substances and say, you know what, you just need to get your act together. So call around and ask who's in your community. Who do you serve? Who's your ideal client? And what is your perspective on addiction and recovery? And then you'll have a growing list, for your area. I like to do that. I like to meet with business development people, not only in substance abuse, but also in some of our other, local communities, local, businesses, to see what they're doing. And is this a good resource for that family member that's sitting in front of me? What else, you guys? Yeah, Jeff and Deborah J. Love First. That's a good one too. The book is actually, the link to that is in the slides that can be sent out. That's one that I love to give to families if they're afraid to look at a formal intervention. So, you guys have really enjoyed talking with you. I want to be respectful of time. I know it's about 1 o'clock or so. Is there anything else I can do for you, or share information I can share?
I just wanted to confirm that I can share your PowerPoint with the attendees.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, let's convert that to PDF when we send it out, since it's in Keynote.
Yeah.
And if everyone wants to make sure they put their email in the chat, just so we make sure we've got the folks that are here and their information in the chat, and we can send that out to everybody. But thank you, Jessica, for being with us
You're
today.
welcome.
You were fabulous.
Thank you
So enjoyed it.
And
I
I'm
have
just gonna
one
hit
last
send on my.
question.
Got it. What you got?
I have, how do you remove the background from you people from Dovetree on the screen here?
Oh,
That's
Your
our
secret.
made.
it's called virtual background on your Zoom. If you're on a phone or camera, right next to your video screen, it says choose
Here.
virtual background.
This is where I am.
This is where
All
I
right.
am. I'm in my
Yeah.
living room.
I
It's
just
an
wondered that
almond
could come in,
space. There we go.
Look what
could
Jessica
come in real
said.
handy. I got to run. Thank you, Taylor,
Hey,
for the
thanks so much.
invitation.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
being
Jessica,
here.
for the presentation. And
It was really
hope
nice.
to see you again soon.
I'm going to the beach now. It's Friday.
There you go.
All right,
Oh,
next
no.
week
Bye.
we will have, next week we have Jan Pompey, who's an interventionist that's going to be joining us on the
Oh,
tips
there you
and
go.
tricks of intervention. And
Very
those
good.
that work with that. And we'd love to have you all back join us, same time, same place. We'll send out some more information on that. But these are going to continue. We've had a couple questions on how long we'll do these. So these will continue as long as people want to show up and want to have Lunch and Learn Zoom on Friday. We found a niche and found a need, and people seem to be enjoying them. So we really want to thank you, Jessica, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Have
Bye.
fun. Bye. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks. Fran, thanks for your help today.
Bye, Fran.
She's eating her lunch. It's a lunch and learn. It's all good.
That's right.
You're allowed to do that. Fran, I
Yeah.
was talking to who was I talking to this morning about Origins? Allison from Windhaven. She just took over. So we now have a Origins Counseling Dallas. I was trying to find the website for the IOP. They changed Windhaven to Origins Counseling Dallas for the IOP. I was sending somebody over. They're looking for young men for that program in Dallas. So
Very
you were
nice.
muted. I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I said, thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I do a lot with
And
those
I'd love
guys.
to attend any of these lunch and learns that you're doing. This was great. And I was on with the family, so I'm sorry I came on so late.
Glad you were able to join us.
But I look forward to getting your presentation, Jessica. I mean, what I saw was amazing.
I know it was. I was so impressed.
Oh, thank you for that. I love to talk, and I love the educational piece with my families, and so I